Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that is literally reshaping our world right before our eyes. You know, when you read the headlines, it's so easy to just look at the current AI landscape as this friendly, fast-paced tech competition, right? Just a race to build the smartest chatbot or the coolest image generator. But based on the source material we're digging into today, that tells a completely different story. We are definitely not watching a standard tech race. No, we're watching a high-stakes, winner-take-most global war. And the decisions being made right now, they're going to dictate the entire global economy's future for the next 30 years. So think of me as your strategic war room briefer today. Let's map out the exact terrain of this conflict.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's the game plan for today. First up, we'll define the weapon of compute. Then we're going to map out the 8 competing factions. After that, we'll look at the 2 predicted winners. Fourth, we'll uncover the infrastructure and hidden fronts. And finally, what all of this actually means for the future for humanity.
So we have to ask ourselves, is AI just a tech competition, or is it a full-blown global war? Well, our sources challenge our base assumptions right out of the gate. Think about it. Every previous global power struggle was fought over something static. You capture physical territory, you get more land. You capture an oil field, you own that oil field. But owning an oil field doesn't magically grow more oil. The standard public discourse completely misses the massive geopolitical reality happening behind the scenes today simply because the weapon in this war doesn't just sit still.
Which brings us to Section 1, the weapon of compute.
So, unlike physical territory, the weapon in this conflict multiplies and compounds. To really grasp this, we've got to look at Wright's law. It's this economic principle from the 1930s that basically says every time you double your production, your unit costs drop by about 15 to 20%. Well, compute follows Wright's law. That means whichever faction is doubling their compute the fastest is simultaneously getting cheaper and smarter. It's an unstoppable snowball effect. I mean, think about the loop. You get more compute, which trains a better model, which attracts more users, who then generate better data, which trains an even smarter model. Because of this insane compounding loop, the window for new entrants effectively slammed shut in 2024. The leaders are just running way too fast for anyone else to catch up now.
Now, what's really fascinating is looking at what actually limits that compounding speed. You know, everyone in the media focuses on raw GPU counts. You constantly hear about companies buying up tens of thousands of GPUs. But GPUs, they're really just the muscle. The true binding constraint of this war is actually high bandwidth memory, or HBM. HBM is the critical nervous system telling all that muscle exactly what to do and when to do it. You could literally shove 100,000 GPUs into a single room, but without high bandwidth memory, they can't sync up. They basically just become incredibly expensive, well, space heaters. So the faction controlling the most HBM is the one that controls the absolute ceiling for AI capability.
And the cost of flexing that muscle? It is snowballing rapidly. Just look at this timeline. Back in 2020, GPT-3 cost around $4.5 million to train. Jump just 3 years later to 2023, and GPT-4 cost up to $100 million. Now, fast forward to 2025, and Meta is planning up to $145 billion in total capital expenditures. If this trajectory holds up, a single training run for a frontier model in 2027 is projected to easily blow past $1 billion. To put that into perspective, that's a level of financial gravity that literally only a handful of entities on the entire planet can withstand.
Moving on to Section 2, the 8 competing factions.
So who can actually survive that kind of financial gravity? It's time for our rapid battlefield survey of the major players, and this brilliantly illustrates the exact war room matrix we're dealing with today. We've got 8 distinct players, and what's crazy is every single giant here has a massive structural vulnerability. OpenAI, incredible consumer reach, but they burn cash. Microsoft has enterprise lock-in, but relies heavily on OpenAI. Meta uses open source to disrupt, but they lose their proprietary edge. China leads in extreme efficiency, but they hit a hard hardware ceiling. Google has massive infrastructure, but struggles with organizational slowness. Anthropic, supreme enterprise trust, but faces heavy government friction. The Musk stack is perfectly integrated, but reliant on one highly distracted individual. And finally, regulators set the rules, but move way too slowly for the actual technology.
Let's drill into a few of these, starting with OpenAI. $14 billion. That is OpenAI's projected annual net loss for 2026. Let that sink in. I mean, sure, they have 900 million weekly active users, which makes ChatGPT the most downloaded app on Earth. But having 900 million users who actually cost more to serve than they generate in revenue,
That is a structural emergency. They are effectively fighting a war on 5 fronts, all at once: consumer, revenue, talent, compute, and legal, all while bleeding billions of dollars. Now, immediately contrast that $14 billion with this number: $294,000. That is the confirmed training costs of China's DeepSeek R1 model, which incredibly achieved near-frontier reasoning performance. See, because China is blocked from acquiring the most advanced chips, they just can't win the raw power race. So instead, they made the chip race irrelevant by pivoting to extreme efficiency. Their whole strategy is pure price penetration. They're flooding the market with ultra-cheap models to build global dependency, which effectively serves as a brilliant asymmetric weapon. Meanwhile, over in the corporate arena, we have this massive strategic clash between Meta and Microsoft. Listen, Meta's open source strategy with Llama isn't charity, okay? It's a highly calculated weapon. Meta gives away these billion-dollar models to intentionally collapse the industry's pricing power. They're doing this to ensure that no one, like a Microsoft or a Google, can own the interface layer between Meta and its 3.5 billion social media users. Microsoft, on the flip side, is playing the lock-in game. They don't really need to win the smartest model race. They just embed AI so deeply into Azure and GitHub that it makes it technically devastating for a Fortune 500 company to even try switching providers. Then we have the deep paradox of Anthropic. Get this, they went from $87 million to $30 billion in annualized revenue in under 3 years, specifically by being the most auditable, trusted AI company out there. But that exact same ethical stance, specifically their absolute refusal to allow autonomous weapons to operate without human oversight, well, it cost them the biggest defense procurement budget in history. It actually got them blacklisted by the Pentagon as a quote-unquote supply chain risk. Talk about a catch-22.
All right, on to Section 3, the 2 predicted winners.
So, with all these vulnerabilities floating around, the math simply dictates a brutal consolidation. By 2030, our sources indicate that only 2 of these 8 factions actually have the structural depth to remain standing at the absolute frontier. Let's see how this builds into the ultimate showdown. It's Google's digital substrate versus Elon Musk's physical stack. Basically, Google wins the digital physics battle, right? They own an unmatched digital foundation. But the Musk stack owns the absolutely crucial, vertically integrated physical world deployment layer.
Let's look at Google first. They are absolutely the sleeping giant of this war. People often forget that Google actually invented the transformer architecture that literally all modern AI is built on. But their real hidden moat, it's their infrastructure. They have 7th-generation custom TPUs that are just wildly power efficient. They have 25 years of proprietary search and YouTube data that no one else can buy at any price. They even have an internal AI called Alpha Evolve that's literally designing their next-generation chips for them. When you own the substrate, the chips, the data, and billions of Android devices for global distribution, you really don't need to win every PR news cycle. You just sit back and let the math compound.
On the other side of the ring is the intense financial gravity of the Musk stack, completely driven by that massive SpaceX and xAI merger. That move created a $1.25 trillion entity. Why does this matter so much? Because for the first time, one single person effectively controls the world's largest compute supercluster in Memphis, plus the real-world vision data from millions of Tesla cars on the road, and the global connectivity of Starlink. It is literally the only faction that owns the raw compute, the models, the fleet, and the entire data pipeline without having to rely on any third-party dependencies whatsoever. Let's look at Section 4, Infrastructure and Hidden Fronts.
So the crucial point here is that owning all of this compute presents a massive physical target. I mean, these gigawatt-scale superclusters, like the Colossus site with its hundreds of thousands of GPUs, they are highly vulnerable targets just sitting out there on the surface. If we're looking at a multi-decade technological conflict, leaving your absolute most valuable armories exposed to kinetic, cyber, or EMP threats is a profound risk. And our sources highlight a really fascinating strategic insight here: the TerraFab solution. By potentially using the Boring Company to move these massive compute clusters completely underground, you instantly gain natural blast shielding, thermal stability to drastically drop those cooling costs, and just unparalleled physical security.
And then there is another totally hidden front, the 8th faction, the regulators. Just look at this dynamic for a second. Safety advocates want Western AI development slowed down for very real, valid ethical reasons. But meanwhile, strategic adversaries want Western deployment slowed down for geopolitical reasons. Honestly, it doesn't even matter what the intentions are. Mechanically, it is the exact same outcome.
Regulators inadvertently act as a massive force multiplier for geopolitical adversaries, completely changing the speed limit of the entire war. Now, we're not taking sides here at all. It's simply the structural, impartial reality of how regulation actively impacts that compounding loop we talked about earlier.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, the future for humanity. So with all these massive titans clashing and the rules constantly shifting, where does that actually leave us? Let's bring this macroeconomic war room briefing back down to earth for a minute, right to your everyday life, your career, and your family. Because the stark reality is that the cost of intelligence is collapsing. We are literally applying rights law directly to human cognition. Tasks that cost $500 an hour today for highly specialized skills, they're going to cost between $5 and $10 in AI inference within a decade. That is staggering deflationary power. And what it means is that the primary value you provide in the market moving forward must be something an AI system cannot easily retrieve, synthesize, and just apply on demand.
So how do you actually navigate this? Well, the sources suggest 3 really actionable takeaways. Number 1, develop irreplaceable physical world human skills. We're talking about things that require deep human empathy, physical dexterity, or complex real-world problem solving. Number 2, invest in the core infrastructure winners. You know, the ones owning the actual substrate and the energy grids. And number 3, prepare your family. The job market is structurally moving way past the rote memorization that we all learned in school. You have to actively build skills that are perfectly suited for an intelligence-abundant economy.
This entire landscape is shifting beneath our feet at light speed, guys. We are watching the architecture of the next 30 years being built in real time. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on. In a world of completely abundant, nearly free compute, what kind of intelligence are we raising in our homes? And how exactly are you positioning your own human value for the future? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today, and keep your eyes open. The board is definitely set and the pieces are moving.